Good morning. Welcome to the second in a series of webinars organized by UPOV on completeness and relevance of variety collections in distinctness, uniformity and stability examinations. We are very pleased today to have two colleagues from experts in the field, one from Germany, Ms. Swenja Tams, and from the Netherlands, Mr. Marco Hoffman. A little bit of housekeeping. We can go up to a maximum of 90 minutes this morning. It would be useful if you could rename yourselves with the two-letter country code before your name or the organization so that we see the acronym. There will not be any interpretation today. Concerning interventions, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of both presentations from Swenja and from Marco. So when it comes to the Q&A session, you can simply raise your hand electronically to ask for the floor, or you could also put a question into the chat function. Outside of that, we will just monitor the chat function for any technical issues. So you know that this webinar will be recorded and it will be made available on the UPOV website. You will be receiving an email with the live link when the video is ready, and also PDF versions of the presentations. But you'll be sent that after this webinar. The Q&A session will not be recorded, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have. I'll turn you over to Leontino to give the context of the webinar.
Thank you, Caroline. To set the scene for today's webinar, we're going to talk about UPOV document TGP4, variety collections. Variety collections are a very important part of the DUS procedure, as the convention requires that to be granted plant variety protection, a candidate variety must be distinguishable from any variety whose existence is a matter of common knowledge anywhere in the world. So to understand common knowledge, it's important to have an inventory and identify varieties all over the world that belong to that particular crop or species. Then, as a subsequent step, a collection should be constituted, and in this sense, a selection of those varieties of common knowledge will be brought into the collection. The relevance of the collections is collections are necessary to support selecting similar varieties and organizing the trial. Well-organized trials facilitate exchange of test reports. What goes into a collection? Variety collections usually contain variety descriptions and/or living plant material. Variety descriptions can be in the form of full descriptions generated on the basis of the UPOV test guidelines by the authority itself, or full descriptions based on the UPOV test guidelines generated by third-party authorities. Variety descriptions may be also of a shorter form, which could be useful for grouping varieties, but also images, photos, digital illustrations, as well as catalogs, publications, and information available in scientific publications or commercial catalogs. Living plant material is the preferred form of a variety collection, as it would enable a direct side-by-side comparison of the candidate against similar varieties. But that may happen in the form of a permanent collection or a collection that is based on a need basis. So whenever there is a need, the authority would request material for that variety. There are several considerations for each crop, whether it's seed or vegetatively propagated, annual or perennial. For each crop, there will be a number of factors that will vary and will influence the decisions and the costs and all the resourcing necessary to establish and maintain collections with living plant materials. Also, phytosanitary regulations may bring challenges for the movement of plant material and therefore influencing collections of varieties. So to constitute a variety collection, first, it's important to understand the range within the crop that will be collected and then make an inventory of that crop. The first step in setting the range means that authorities may choose either to have collections of varieties with the whole species or to have a restricted range within the species, such as to have collections belonging to a particular type. As you have examples on screen where you could have 2 or 6 row barley or whichever range that would be suitable for growing in a particular condition, for example. But the key point is that a collection is never complete. A collection is never established definitely, as it needs constant updates, monitoring of developments in plant breeding, breeding activity worldwide, and therefore continuous monitoring. To make an inventory, authorities rely on databases with protected varieties, applications filed, titles granted, as well as national listing catalogs, also collections that are publicly available and publications, and the walking libraries, the expert input from DUS examiners and other crop experts. It's also important to note that common knowledge is not restricted to national borders. The inventory should be made worldwide, as common knowledge is a matter of global common knowledge that goes beyond any national border. Document TGP4 on the constitutional maintenance of variety collections also anticipates the situation where a variety collection cannot be established definitely, and therefore there may be varieties of common knowledge which could not be entered into the collection, and these situations could also relate to plant material that the authority cannot import or cannot introduce into their collections. So how to proceed in these cases? The answer comes from the general introduction on DUS, document TG1, where supplementary procedures are proposed. For example, to publish variety descriptions. In this regard, the result of DUS examination generates a variety description that authorities can publish as a means, a supplementary procedure, as a means for further peer reviewing their decisions and descriptions generated. Also, the peer reviewing can be performed by colleagues, by other authorities, and cooperation amongst UPOV members is key in this area to exchange information about varieties of common knowledge. The use of expert panels is also possible and advisable in circumstances, as expert knowledge can bring information about further varieties of common knowledge, and to publish the list of varieties that was included in trial or examined along with the candidate variety, which can support understanding the descriptions generated and decisions taken. But bringing that into the context of today's webinar, UPOV members have actively seeking measures to enhance cooperation in DUS examination, in particular the exchange of DUS test reports. Recently, UPOV introduced the DUS report exchange module, which is an online platform that authorities can use to provide DUS test reports, as well as to request DUS test reports from other UPOV members. We would highly recommend that you all take a moment to go into the UPOV website and become familiar with the DUS report exchange module. But for the purposes of the webinar today, the webinar is an opportunity to share information about the practices of different UPOV members, as well as to better understand how UPOV members organize bilateral cooperation and the conditions they set to exchange test reports with the objective to enhancing international cooperation, which reduces duplication, improves efficiency of DUS examination, and strengthens the quality of the UPOV system globally. So on this note, it's a pleasure to invite Ms. Swenja Tams from Germany to take the floor. Please, Svenja.
Thank you for the floor. Yes, my name is Swenja Tams. I'm working in the German Bundessortenamt, and today I want to share with you how we consider taking over reports from other authorities. What are our conditions? I will now share my presentation. So our conditions for the use of DUS results from other UPOV members is the title of my presentation. And first of all, I want to start with the benefits of cooperation in DUS testing, as already Leontino mentioned. For breeders, the benefit is that harmonized DUS results and variety descriptions are there and will be provided. Of course, for breeders, it's also the cost reduction when DUS results are used in several countries. For authorities, or for us as German authority, the reduction of the testing capacity is possible if DUS tests are conducted by another authority on our behalf for the whole species. So this is our benefit. Our conditions for accepting DUS reports, first of all, we need to have agreed test guidelines on which the DUS reports are built up. Of course, UPOV has a lot of guidelines for most of the species, and we have to agree to use those test guidelines, and perhaps there might be also other test guidelines which are relevant, like CPVO test guidelines, or even if the species is very small and there's no UPOV guideline available, there might be a good national guideline in the testing authority which could be used, and we as a requesting authority have to agree on which guideline is the basis of the DUS test. So second, we expect that a general principle and guidance developed by UPOV will be applied when assessing DUS. So we consider the testing authority always very competent to do this, but however, it's need to be said that there are a lot of general guidance, and including the UPOV form for requesting and reporting is also provided by UPOV, and this is a good basis for the exchange also. But from a technical point, it's very important to consider an appropriate variety collection at the testing authority, which include all varieties adapted to our national growing conditions, our growing conditions in Germany, because the variety we will ask for is growing in Germany. So varieties which are also adapted to our growing conditions need to be in the variety collection. So the fulfillment of these conditions have to be agreed before results are requested. We do it by exchanging information with the testing or the possible testing authority in advance. We also exchange varieties. We may provide material. It's really to have a discussion on a colleague level. What are your consideration, or what is the consideration of the testing authority? What are they doing, and are we happy with that, or are there issues which need to be discussed beforehand? So what we aim for is really a good understanding of the testing system in the other country before we accept in general the DUS reports for a certain species. Yeah. Now I come to what do we consider as appropriate variety collection. We have a focus whether listed or protected varieties in Germany is in the variety collection of the testing authority, or will be taken up in that variety collection. We look for varieties which are marketed national or under the same climatic condition. I already mentioned that. The range of expression of our German applications need to be covered. It could be that the testing authority did test beforehand only certain types, and that's why the range of expression might be broadened for them, might be okay also. So this is what we discuss with the testing authority. So in the end, it has to be decided whether varieties had to be added to the variety collection of the testing authorities. And as Leontino already mentioned, there is guidance in TGP 4.1, and it does not differ whether you test on your own or the variety is tested by another authority. It's always about have an appropriate variety collection and consider all the thoughts which are in this guidance. So how do we use DUS reports from other authorities? The conclusion on DUS is followed for the German procedure, provided previously agreed requirements are fulfilled. So it's really that our decision is based on the DUS report, and it's becoming a part of our procedure. So we aim for the same decision on DUS in both countries. So if the testing authorities decides it's not distinct or it's not uniform, then we aim for the same decision here. We do not want to have different decision. We try to clarify that and understand why the testing authority comes to a certain conclusions. So variety description become official description in German procedure. There might be translation if requested by the breeder. Often variety description are bilingual in the national language and in English, and often this is sufficient and there's no translation needed. So in case of a separate submission of plant material in testing and requesting authority, the identity has to be checked and it has to be clarified how we do that. Whether we send a subsample to the testing authority to see to be sure that our standard sample is the same than the sample where the DUS results and the variety description is based on, or we request a subsample from the testing authority to check it on our own side by side. It's important that the report and the material really belongs together. So there are also some administrative agreements taken by us. We like to have a commitment of the other authority to test on behalf of Germany. So this is the legal basis for us keeping not keeping own testing capacities for those crops. So we really have an agreement, we have a contract, and we can be sure that even in next year or later, this authority will accept to test on our behalf. We also like to have a commitment to use available reports for agreed species. This is also important for the transparency from for applicants. They need to know where the report will come from at the time they apply for. And of course, the extension of this cooperation is possible case by case. So if we receive an application for a species which we did not expect, we have to consider whether we build up our own testing capacity, or whether there is an authority who could do it for us. And then we start this process of discussing reference collection and the way of testing, and we could extend this commitment to more species after discussion. So we contract other authorities to undertake DUS tests on our behalf. This has, for example, taken place for varieties in 45 species for the last 10 years. And therefore, we could reduce our testing capacities. Though in many of the species, we rarely receive applications, and it's really a big effort to if we would have kept our testing capacities and knowledge. And therefore, we are happy that somebody else who's really competent and in the matter and in the species is able to provide DUS reports and agrees on a contract with us. And we also have contracts to accept the results of other authorities reciprocally. So for some species, it depends where the applicant applies first. So if he applies first in the other authority, then they will start testing and we will take over their reports. And it could be also vice versa. This is a way to go for a number of agricultural species where there's a lot of testing within Europe, and it's not necessary always to have 2 DUS results in 2 countries. But we have contracts for that, and it's clear for the applicants how we will act. So this is already my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm curious to hear your considerations and your questions. Thank you.
Okay, that's perfect. Well, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Marco Hoffman. I'm a senior policy officer working at Naktuinbouw, and I will provide you a presentation on the completeness and relevance of variety collections in the DUS examination. And of course, this is from a perspective of Naktuinbouw. So first, well, maybe a little repetition of what Leontino said, but first I want to give you some information on why variety collections are necessary in the DUS trials. Well, of course, a new variety must be clearly distinct from all varieties of common knowledge. That's clearly a UPOV principle. And since there can be a great many of them, a variety collection helps the DUS examiner to map all the relevant varieties for common knowledge. Again, there can be a selection which varieties are needed for comparison. And of course, at the end, practically determine which variety should be included in a trial for as a similar variety. Basic UPOV guidance, as Leontino already mentioned, Article 7 of UPOV 1991 Act and TGP4. So that's a clear basis. So go for varieties of common knowledge to the variety collection, and at the end, the comparison varieties, the similar varieties. Okay, then, we have 2 kinds of collections, as already mentioned by Leontino. We have living collections, we have non-living collections. The living collections can be seeds, can be living plants, herbaceous or woody in the form of trees. And non-living collections, we can have variety descriptions, photos, DNA. And at Naktuinbouw, we also work with external crop experts, the so-called walking variety collections. And what I want to do is go to these kind of collections one by one and mention some, well, remarkable facts from the perspective of Naktuinbouw. So let's start with seed collections. It's a kind of living collections. Well, to have a seed collection, you need facilities and finances to store the seed and maintain the seed. That's, well, of course, a very important basis. Well, seeds are very small, thus it means that, well, you do not need much space for storage. Yeah, seeds are small, thus that means that it's also easy to send them and to yeah, to get them from another authority or from the breeder. But of course, it's living material, so that means that exchange can be hampered by phytosanitary legislation, and of course, you need consent from the breeder to exchange. So that's, yeah, typical for seed collection. And then, well, the main challenge in our perspective to seed collection is the renewal of samples. So of course, the germination capacity will yeah, will reduce after several years, and that means that, yeah, after several years, you need to yeah, to have a new sample. And well, in principle, at Naktuinbouw, our experience is that you need that every 5 to 10 years, depending on the crop, of course. And depending on the germination capacity of that crop. And that means that you have to renew, including the verification with the original sample. And that really takes a lot of effort and time. Then we have the, well, the living plant collections. What's typical on about that? Well, of course, you need field capacity or greenhouse capacity and facilities to store and maintain the material. It's of course depending on the crop, but often it needs much space for storage, so you need to have that space. It is, of course, possible and accepted also by UPOV to use external collection. And in practice, we do that as Naktuinbouw. So we, for a lot of crops, we have, yeah, our own living collections, but sometimes we need collections of others. And a very good example is the bulb collection, especially the tulip collection from the KVB, which is not far from the location of Naktuinbouw, but we make a very good use of that. And it's a, yeah, of course, the basis of that collection should be reliable. And in the case of KVB, it is a very reliable collection. Then, of course, specific growing conditions and cultivation knowledge is required. Yeah, especially in ornamentals, we have living plant collection, and the amount of crops is very high, and every crop needs is specific growing conditions, and you have to, yeah, have that knowledge, and that sometimes is rather a challenge. Then the next point, well, like in the seed collection, the exchange can be hampered by phytosanitary legislation. And, well, you also need to have consent from the breeder to exchange with other examination offices. Yeah, and sometimes, well, of course, before you use a living material of a variety in your collection, well, you need to be sure that the material is healthy. So you don't want to have your collection infected by a diseased material. So sometimes also testing for diseases is necessary. So that means it's quite time consuming, and well, the main challenges in case of living plant collections is space. And that means that completeness is, well, rather impossible. So you have to make yeah, decisions, and you have to make good selections. What do you want to have in your collection, and what is not really necessary? So that's a challenge to do. Yeah, and then the second challenge is, well, of course, the maintenance. Well, it's living material, so that means the material gets aged. That means that after sometimes you need the renewal of material and including the verification. and you need to keep the material free from diseases. And maybe a very good example is we have a good collection of Phalaenopsis, an orchid. It's well, rather a big job to keep that collection alive, because every 4 or 5 years you need to renew the material. So it's rather a challenge to do so. Then let's go to the non-living collections. Well, start with the variety descriptions. Well, of course, for variety descriptions, you need software for storage, and well, you need, you use these descriptions to select and search for similar varieties. So you have to include it in your software. Well, of course, it's rather easy for storage, because it doesn't need much space. So it's you can have as much as variety descriptions as you wish. Exchange of variety descriptions is rather easy. Of course, sometimes you need to translate the descriptions, but the exchange on zich is easy. Then the use of external descriptions is limited, because every examination office uses its own format. Sometimes you have a PDF, and of course the plant material is described under other conditions than we have, and that means that we try to make as much as possible in-house descriptions. So that means that we get a description of the material based on our conditions. Of course, we preferably use DUS descriptions, but as Leontino already mentioned, also non-official descriptions can be very useful. The main challenges for variety descriptions, get the descriptions from other authorities in our own database. Sometimes you have PDF descriptions, so you have to do a job to get them into your database. Making in-house descriptions, as I mentioned, we prefer to have in-house descriptions. So at the end, we also need the material and make our own descriptions. And of course, the adaptation of old descriptions have to be adapted when there is a new test guideline. So that and that's also a challenge. When there's a new test guideline, you have another, sometimes changes in notes or new characteristics so that means that you have to adapt as much as possible your descriptions. Okay, then we go to the next one. That's the photo collection. For photo collection, like variety descriptions, you need specific software to store and also search efficiently to similar varieties. Of course, it takes ICT capacity, but at the end, it's not too much restrictions for space and storage. Exchange of photo files is rather easy. Then we have the point of standardization of light and background. So at Naktuinbouw, when we make pictures of our varieties, we have standardized conditions with a certain background and with a certain light. When you get photos from other examination offices, they often are else. So that's a fact. And then of course the description of the photo to the the connection to the photo to the description is recommended. It's highly preferable to have a good combination of the photo and the description. The main challenges, as I already told, the interpretation of the picture. When you get pictures from other examination officers or breeders, then well, it's under different circumstances with the typical light, and sometimes they are taken outside instead of inside. Yeah, so that's a challenge to handle that. Then we have the case that sometimes we have high numbers of pictures, and it's rather time consuming to search for similar varieties in these high number of pictures. Maybe a good example in, again, Phalaenopsis, we have a good photo collection, more than 4,000, 5,000 pictures. And it's rather time consuming to, well, to go through that, these pictures for selecting similar varieties. And well, maybe it's good to mention that at the moment we have an AI project going on to help us with that, to save time, to be more efficient, and well, that's well, at least the direction we go into to solve that problem. Yeah, and then another thing, and that's of course not only for photo collection. Well, you can have a lot of photos with a lot of from a lot of varieties, and also for varieties which are very old. But at the end, when you have a match, and you are, yeah, you think, well, this is very similar to my candidate variety, then well, it's sometimes it's a challenge to find the material, especially in case of old varieties. So that about the photo collection. Then we have the DNA collection, and we use that for more and more crops. Yes, of course, it needs a database and a standard marker set. Development is expensive, so and especially therefore centralized database can be very important to, yeah, to share the costs. Yeah, at Naktuinbouw, it has been restricted to specific crops, so it's far too expensive for small crops. So we mainly have DNA databases for yeah, for big crops. And sometimes, until now, it has not been successful. So in case of tulip, for example, well, this is a big crop for Naktuinbouw, and it would be very helpful to have a DNA database, but it has not been successful until yet. The DNA of tulip is too big, too complicated, and we cannot find good marker sets until now. So yeah, the next point, there's no restriction for space or storage in case of DNA. And well, of course, just the fact, well, often there's no correlation to morphology. But what are the main challenges? Well, we find it's rather a challenge to get consent from the breeder for exchange, especially for exchange outside the European Union. It's really an administrative burden for Naktuinbouw to, well, to ask that permission and administrate all the yeah, the things. So that's rather a challenge for Naktuinbouw. And of course, the other challenge is, well, when you exchange, other examination offices can work with other marker set. So exchange of yeah, then in that case you can exchange the yeah, the leaves or isolated DNA, and but that's, yeah, that's also a thing that yeah, is remarkable for and a challenge for DNA. And then last but not least, we have the external crop experts, the so-called walking variety collection. Yeah, I know that many countries do not work with these walking variety collection, but at the picture you see how it works. It's in fact a panel of experts with a lot of expertise of the crop concerned. So it really needs independent specialists with much knowledge of the varieties of the crop. And of course, the second thing is that yeah, it would be very it's very helpful that there is not too much of physical distance from the trial, because well, the specialists have to visit the trial to give their advice, and well, when you have a lot when there's a big distance, then it's well, it's not very easy. And of course, well, the Netherlands is very privileged to be a small country. Yeah, or the most specialists within half an hour they are at our trial fields. So for us it works very well, and well, for some crops it's really an outcome to have this kind of external experts. Yeah, what does the external expert do? They only advise the examiner on similar varieties. So at the end, the decisions will be made by the examiner and not by the external expert. Yeah, normally the visit is during the trial. So what sometimes happen is when they have a good suggestion, well, you should have this or this variety to yeah, to check for as a similar variety. Yeah, then it's already in the second year of in the first year of the trial, and it means that well, we need an extra. It, it can be the case that you need an extra year for your trial, because you have to get the suggested variety and you have to put it in the trial. So it can cost an extra year. And as I already said, it's mainly used for ornamentals. Yeah, what are the main challenges? Main challenges are the, well, availability of suitable persons that should be independent and have a lot of knowledge. Yeah, and what we also see is that especially in crops with a lot of varieties, it becomes more and more difficult to remember, well, all the varieties, well, just with the human brain, especially when they come very close to each other. Yeah, then the next point, the maintenance of the collection. Yes, of course, the completeness and proper maintenance of collections are very essential for a reliable DUS examination. Yeah, therefore, an international cooperation and networks are fundamental. And well, we are lucky that Naktuinbouw has a huge network, but it's really very important. What we also face is a proper naming is essential, especially well, in ornamentals and also fruits. There are many synonyms, very much trade names available on the market. Yeah, and of course you try to prevent to have duplicates in your collection, so you always have to make the connection of a commercial name, a trade name, to the correct variety denomination. And that's well, is rather time consuming for examiners of Naktuinbouw. So concerning the regular maintenance work, well, of course you have to do, as Leontino already said, inventory of new varieties of common knowledge every year, also from outside your territory. That means that you have to include new relevant varieties in your collection. You have to rejuvenate living collection, so especially seed and living plants. Yeah, and then you have the inventory of dead varieties, varieties that do not exist anymore. Well, we try well, try to register that in our database, because when you know it's a dead variety, it does not make sense to try to get the variety and put it in your trial. Yeah, the exchange of collection material and cooperation. Exchange of collection material is crucial to avoid gaps and to share knowledge. Yeah, cooperation and international networks are fundamental. we more and more face the problem of the exchange of living material and DNA that can be hampered by phytosanitary legislation and also consent from the breeder, which I already told, it's really a lot of an administrative burden. Yeah, and therefore shared collections and shared databases are a very good possibility to work more efficient. And well, for example, we have that as Naktuinbouw in potato and melon, and well, that's a rather a good solution. Then I want to finish with some overall conclusions. Well, we think that all types of collections are relevant. Yeah, and it's really depending on the crop which one is most suitable, and often combinations provide the best, are the best. Yeah, the challenge of being complete and the proper maintenance, well, it's really essential for reliable DUS examination. International cooperation and exchange are crucial to avoid gaps and to share knowledge. Breeder consent is an administrative burden and can be limiting to exchange the living material and DNA. And well, rapidly increasing numbers of varieties can make that, yeah, efficient tools are indispensable. So, for example, artificial intelligence and DNA databases. Well, we see that living plant collections become maybe less feasible at a large scale, and DNA and digital tools gain importance. Yeah, and more varieties become extincted, and well, when you do not administrate that after a match of yeah, of that variety, yeah, it appears that it's impossible to gain that variety, and that's yeah, also rather a challenge. So that was my yeah, my presentation. Thank you very much.